The Where Our Minds Wander podcast may contain sensitive content and explicit language. Listener discretion is advised. Greetings, fellow wanderers, to the places our minds wander.
The house at the end of the dirt road, where disembodied voices whisper and strange sounds make the living shiver.
Where shadows lurk at the edge of the woods, just outside your back door. And mysterious lights speed beyond reason across the clear night sky.
Odd events throughout time that lead you down the rabbit hole.
I'm Wes.
And I'm Beth.
And this is Where Our Minds Wander. Hello and welcome to Our Minds Wander. All you fellow wanderers, thank you for joining us.
Hello, everyone.
Well, before we get into tonight's stories, we'd like to kindly ask all of you fellow wanderers, if you haven't already, would you head on over to your favorite listening platform and leave us a 5-star review and a comment? It'd really help us.
It really would. It helps more people find us, and frankly, it makes us feel good.
Well, that it does. But it does help us move up the list.
Yes.
So more new people can find Where Our Minds Wander.
Yeah. And we typically mention this at the end of the episode, but if you're interested in either topic that we cover tonight, or in any of our episodes, actually, if you go to our show notes, you can check out all of the sources that we used to put our episode together. But there's tons of stuff that we don't include in the episode because we try to keep our episodes to a certain time limit. But if you have the time and you want to know more, you can always start with those show notes and those sources and check things out for yourself. And usually those sources will have links to other sources. And so you can take a dive down that rabbit hole as deep as you want to go.
Yeah, and we try to include all the pertinent information that we can in our stories. But there are bits and pieces here that we find might not really fit into our time limit that we try to set up under an hour. So, you may find something there that may lead you down another rabbit hole.
Mm-hmm. Join us on the mad journey.
Right. Well, with that said, Beth's going to get us started tonight with her story. It's a pretty good one.
As usual. If you walk through the main gate and along the mussel shell driveway lined with boxwood hedges, the first thing you might notice are the two very large and very old magnolia trees that almost cover the front of the 2-story brick Sweetwater mansion in Florence, Alabama. Between them is the decaying circular fountain that was once filled with clear, clean water. As you face the front entrance, flanked by white columns supporting a lovely portico, you can see the front of the house a little bit better, with its Flemish bond pattern of bricks, where every other brick is turned so the short end faces outward. Maybe one of the double-leafed front doors creaks open, beckoning you inside. Maybe a breeze blows through one of the many double-hung windows, and a curtain flutters. Luckily, it's a bright, sunny day, because you can imagine how foreboding it might feel if the sky suddenly darkened and rain began pattering on the tin roof. You've heard about how this place sat completely abandoned for 2 decades. But you've also heard some of the mansion's 191-year history, and you know, without even being told, that it's also incredibly haunted. You have to be brave to go inside. According to AbandonedAlabama.com, The central hall in Sweetwater Mansion is 16 by 48 feet and has a double staircase. Each of the 4 first-floor rooms has its own marble fireplace. When the Barron Hospitality Company purchased the Sweetwater Mansion in 2023, they found the wallpaper peeling away from the walls. Ceilings were caving in. Some rooms were so bad that it wasn't even safe enough to go in them. Although the company hasn't quite determined how they want to use the property, which once included 4,000 acres of crops and gardens, they do reportedly recognize that it's a property with significant historical value. According to U.S. Ghost Adventures, Major General John Brahan owned a 4,000-acre plantation in Florence when he fought in the War of 1812. In fact, part of the current town of East Florence was once part of his plantation. Running through the property was Sweetwater Creek, and when he began building his mansion, he named the house after it. But it was a plantation, and Brahan had several enslaved people, 129 of them. According to Shoals Black History, they lived in cabins along the creek. There's also some evidence that enslaved men actually built the house itself, hung the wallpaper, and did some of the carpentry. In fact, there's evidence that one of the men who hung the wallpaper was Illinois Congressman Oscar DePriest's grandfather. In 1929, DePriest was the first black congressman to serve in Alabama since 1901. But back in 1835, the plantation produced 200 bushels of wheat, 100 bushels of rye, 5,000 bushels of Indian corn, 3,200 bushels of oats. It had baled 190 bales of cotton and produced 200 pounds of wool. But that's not all. They had also produced 50 bushels of peas and beans, 50 bushels of sweet potatoes, and 10 bushels of Irish potatoes, all because of the work of enslaved people. Brahan passed away before his mansion was finished, and its ownership passed to his son, Major Robert Weekly Brahan. Robert's wife, Martha, didn't like the fact that the mansion was so far outside the town of Florence. She much preferred living in town. So rather than finish the construction, Robert Brahan made a trade with his son-in-law, Robert Miller Patton. Brahan got a townhouse in Florence, and Patton was the new owner of the plantation. He finished the mansion's construction, and he also, obviously, took over control of the plantation itself. Patton and his wife, Jane Locke Brahan, had 8 children, 6 sons and 2 daughters. Before moving into the mansion, Patton was elected to the Alabama state legislature. Now, Patton was a Whig, which meant he favored rapid economic development, federal funding of infrastructure, public education, and a national banking system. It just so happens that Presidents William Harrison and Zachary Taylor were both Whigs. But Patton also continued to have enslaved people. In 1850, according to Shoals Black History, Patton was recorded as having 63 enslaved people on his plantation, ranging between the ages of 53 and just 1 year old. Of those 63, 3 were listed as fugitives of the state, a 54-year-old man, an 18-year-old girl, and a 4-year-old boy. In 1860, there were 118 enslaved people on the plantation, living in 30 cabins on the property. That year, an enslaved 60-year-old man died of inflamed bowels. A 40-year-old woman died 5 days after giving birth, and a 1-year-old child died from a 7-month-long case of whooping cough. Uncle Edmund was 10 years old when he was sold to Patton around 1835. At first, he worked in the house as a houseboy, which basically meant he most likely washed dishes and served meals. As he got older, he became a carriage driver for the Pattons, a butler, and a gardener. But let me back up a little bit. I'll come back to Uncle Edmund later. And for right now, I want to tell you a little bit more about Robert Patton. Historians believe he ran one of the very first cotton gins in Alabama. He most certainly founded the Bell Cotton Factory. When he took over the Sweetwater plantation, he continued his government involvement. First on the state legislature, like I mentioned earlier, but prior to the Civil War, he also served on the Alabama Senate multiple times. He was opposed to secession, but he was a firm supporter of the Confederacy, which I found a tad confusing. I suppose it means that he didn't initially agree with the 11 states breaking away from the Union, but once they did, he firmly supported their fight to keep slavery intact. During the Civil War, Sweetwater Mansion's basement was used as a makeshift hospital for Confederate soldiers and as the county jail. After the Civil War, in 1865, Patton ran for Alabama governor, which he won. But his tenure was short-lived due to Reconstruction, and he was ousted in 1867. So instead, he turned his attention to building railroads and rebuilding the University of Alabama. He also served as a trustee for the Missouri State University, Florence State Normal College, and the Florence Female Synodical College. But now, back to Uncle Edmund. In February of 1871, Patton gave Uncle Edmund 25 acres, including an orchard, vineyard, and garden, and a 2-story house for the sum of $1. This was given to him for his, quote, many years of faithful service.
Like he had a choice.
Yeah. When Uncle Edmund passed away, he was likely buried in the slave cemetery in a forested area of the Patton property. Now, I also want to mention Sam, an enslaved man who was made to accompany Second Lieutenant Billy Patton into war. Billy was with the 16th Alabama Infantry, and Sam was expected to go everywhere his, quote, master went, including into battle. When Billy died at age 24 on the very first day of the Battle of Shiloh in 1862, Sam literally carried his body home to Sweetwater. It can also be assumed that Sam was buried in the slave cemetery. So let's talk about this cemetery for a minute. First, there were no headstones, so there was no true way of knowing just how many people were buried there. And when the Whedon School was erected on the property in 1956, It's widely assumed that many, if not all, of the graves were bulldozed and pushed down a ravine. Today, there are several organizations working towards confirming that fact and doing what they can to provide records of who may have been buried there. Okay, so back to Robert Patton. He and his wife lived at Sweetwater Mansion until their deaths. Next, the house passed on to their daughter, Mattie Hayes Patton Whedon, and her husband, Lieutenant Colonel John David Whedon. When they died, the house stayed in their family, as their son John Downing Whedon and his wife Jessie continued to live there. From this point on, it was known only as the Whedon home. Although it's not clear when exactly, for a very, very long period of time, the only person who lived in the mansion were various caretakers. But then, in 2004, the mansion became truly abandoned. But there's one room in the Sweetwater Mansion that is a complete mystery. It can only be seen through an exterior window, and there's no way to access it from inside the house. There's no door, and doesn't appear to have ever had one. No one has been able to figure out why this room exists. It's in the basement. I probably should have mentioned that. It's in the basement, everybody. Now, there have been plenty of rumors over the years about this secret room. One rumor is that when Sam brought Billy Patton's body home from the Civil War, his distraught parents buried him and his brother, who also died in the war, in that secret room. But a more disturbing rumor is that his mother, Jane, couldn't bear to bury Billy at all and kept his decomposing body in the mystery room. Regardless, Billy's ghost haunts the mansion, and he is a bit of a trickster. According to AbandonedAlabama.com, doors in the mansion will suddenly lock on any lone woman who enters certain rooms, whether that woman is a visitor or a staff member. One of the former caretakers of the house, Emmett Letty Region, claimed that she was locked in a room for so long that once she got out, she would only live in just 2 rooms of the house that she felt comfortable in. Now, I don't know if it was Emmett Letty or a different female caretaker, but at one point, when she came down the stairs one day, she saw a casket sitting in the main hall. When she approached the casket, there was the body of a Confederate soldier lying within it. Now, maddeningly, there aren't any further details about this incident, other than she thought perhaps that it was Billy. Now, one of those incidents all by itself would make someone choose to live in just 2 rooms of the house. So I can't imagine having both experiences of seeing that and being locked in rooms and not being able to get out. The mystery room absolutely exists in the mansion, so it was obviously built for some purpose, even if we don't know what that purpose was. As for other apparitions, there's also a Confederate soldier who patrols the front of the house. It could be Billy, or it could be a second ghost. Other rumors that have swirled about the mansion, like women and children were once held captive inside the house, I would assume during the Civil War, and that a young boy died inside the house after being bitten by a snake. Now, there's no way to fact-check these stories, though, since the mansion does not have its own website. And frankly, searching for information just led to a lot of dead ends. Well, not even dead ends. I actually couldn't find a single thing about the house on any websites tied to Florence's town history. But the ghost stories continue, including sightings of a female apparition dressed in 19th century era clothes, and shadow figures moving around inside the house. People have heard footsteps and have witnessed objects moving. Giggling children have also been heard inside the house. During an investigation on the TV show Paranormal State back in 2011, they apparently caught a ceiling tile being thrown across the room. Today, the Sweetwater Place Foundation, run by patent descendant Angela Howell, is trying very, very hard to restore the house and turn it into a living history museum. The mansion does not have its own website, like I said, but the foundation does have a Facebook page. I checked it out briefly and found that Howell doesn't really want to focus on the ghosts at all, but on the mansion's history and the plantation's history. There are cemetery cleanup days and various volunteer efforts to keep the mansion safe. But of course, a true renovation would cost a lot of money. Hopefully, the Barron Hospitality Group, if that's who truly owns the property now, comes through. When I checked out their website, they do not have the plantation listed in their portfolio, and I couldn't find any press releases about the purchase of the house. So, I'm not entirely sure whose hands it's in now. But there's still plenty to learn about the Sweetwater Mansion and all of its secrets, including who the apparitions might be and the real purpose behind that mystery room.
Well, it seems like there's still a lot to be discovered.
Yes, especially with the groups trying to do more with the cemetery, put some gravestones in and do some research of who might be there. They have a pretty good list going, which is nice. But from what I can tell, Florence is a pretty interesting town. They have a Frank Lloyd Wright house in Florence, and they have some art museums that look like they're pretty darn nice. So I think adding the plantation as a living history museum would really be a good thing.
Yeah, it sounds like an excellent idea.
Mm-hmm.
Well, with that said, we'll return after this short break.
Hey, did you know? There's an unusual monument in Riverside, Iowa. It's the only monument in the United States commemorating an event that hasn't even happened yet, and feasibly won't for another 206 years, if at all. The stone monument sits just outside City Hall, but that's not all. There's also a life-size bronze statue of the future famous American dressed in his iconic yellow velour shirt and black pants, a uniform he wears, or wore or will wear with pride. It may sound strange, but thousands of visitors of all ages come to see this monument and statue dressed in the same uniform and enjoy an entire day celebrating his monumental achievements. The monument, dated March 22, 2228, also says the following: Riverside, Iowa, future birthplace of Captain James T. Kirk. Who'da thunk it?
All right, we are back from the break, and I'm going to tell all you fellow wanderers about a man named Bob Taylor and an unexplained encounter that he had. In 1979, war hero Bob Taylor had been working as a forestry worker for the Livingston Development Corporation in Scotland for 15 years. On November 9th of that year, he and his red setter Lara got into his van and headed to work. His first task that day was to check on the progress of some saplings and to check some fences and gates at the Deckmont Woods near the M8 motorway. It was about a mile from his house. Bob was dressed how he usually would be while on the job, including blue police-issued serge trousers. He parked his truck, and he and Lara got out. According to the Scotland Herald, as he checked the saplings at around 10:30 a.m., Taylor suddenly saw a large circular sphere hovering above the forest floor, about 1,600 feet from his van. It was approximately 20 feet in diameter and was, quote, a dark metallic material with a rough texture like sandpaper. The outer rim was set with small propellers. Curious to what it was, he walked towards it, but without warning, two smaller spiked spheres, quote, similar to sea mines, dropped out of the larger sphere, hit the ground, and rolled straight towards him. Terrified, Taylor tried to outrun them, but the air filled with an acrid, burning smell, and he could feel himself being dragged in the opposite direction, towards the bigger craft. Taylor passed out, and the next thing he remembered was coming to about 20 minutes later. A terrible hissing sound filled the air. Lara was barking furiously. The craft was gone. Taylor tried to stand up, but he was so disoriented that he had to crawl back to his van. He had a terribly bitter taste in his mouth. He was able to pull himself up into his van. Lara jumped in also. The account's different a little here. Some sites say that his van wouldn't start, or he was so disoriented that he couldn't remember how to start it. Others say that the van did start, but he was so disoriented that he drove straight into a ditch. He walked home. When he got home, Taylor's wife Mary was pretty startled by his appearance. He was covered in mud, had scrapes on his chin, and his thick, heavy pants were ripped in several places. She was doubly alarmed when Taylor told her what had happened and that he had been attacked by a, quote, spaceship thing. She called a doctor, and then she called his boss, Malcolm Drummond, at the Livingston Development Corporation. When the doctor arrived, he treated Taylor's abrasions on his chin and thighs. When the police arrived, they found themselves investigating a criminal assault. The first thing they did was convince Taylor to bring them directly to the site where he had had the encounter. According to a BBC article, Detective Con Ian Walk arrived at the scene to find several officers already there. They were examining strange markings on the ground that seemed to appear out of nowhere and end abruptly. There were 32 holes, each about 3.5 inches in diameter. In addition, there were tracks that he assumed were caterpillar tracks from a caterpillar bulldozer. But again, these tracks didn't lead anywhere. It was as if the bulldozer had just appeared out of nowhere. But he really thought they were from man-made machinery, so he headed to the Livingston Development Corporation to find a match. He said, quote, "After examining every piece of machinery that they had up there, we did not find anything to match. These marks just arrived. They did not come from anywhere or go anywhere. They just arrived as though a helicopter or something had landed from the sky." End quote. The police report stated that the marks, quote, "indicated an object of several tons had stood there, but there was nothing to show that it had been driven or towed away." End quote. They were stumped. And Taylor's trousers were sent for forensic analysis, which showed that something had definitely hooked into them and moved upwards. There was no way that they had simply snagged on branches as Taylor tried to run or crawl away. Until he passed away in 2007, Bob Taylor never changed his story, and he never made a dime off telling anyone about his encounter. But from the moment he shared his story, skeptics jumped in with explanations. As early as 1979, UFO skeptic Stuart Campbell went out to the site and suggested that PVC pipes stacked in a nearby field had made the markings. Patricia Hannaford, a doctor and founder of the Edinburgh University UFO Research Society, suggests that Taylor had suffered from an isolated attack of temporal lobe epilepsy. She said this episode would explain Taylor's hallucinations, the bitter taste in his mouth, his loss of consciousness, and his state of disorientation. Physicist Steve Donnelly, who was also the editor of the Skeptic magazine, went one step further, saying that his epileptic seizure may have been caused by a mirage of Venus.
Why is Venus always blamed for everything? It's always Venus. Mirage of Venus.
Local businessman Phil Fenton published an article in 2013 with the theory that Taylor may have suffered a mini-stroke brought on by toxic chemicals and that the UFO was simply a nearby water tower.
How insulting. That's insulting.
Well, yeah, it sure is. But here's the thing. Bob Taylor's encounter happened inside an area known as the Falkirk UFO Triangle, an area in central Scotland that spans from Edinburgh in the east to Stirling in the north and Glasgow in the west. The first possible UFO encounter in that area happened in the year 1767. A pyramid-shaped object was spotted flying over the River Eric that moved with great speed and disappeared a little above Blair Gallery, leaving a trail of destruction in its wake, including a partly destroyed house and bridge. UFOs have been seen in the Falkirk Triangle ever since, with one site claiming there have been 300 a year, every year since 1992. So, with that said, here are some of the more interesting ones. According to the Scotland Herald, in December of 1983, a man named Tom Coventry was waiting for a bus in Glasgow. He was standing at the bus stop on Menach Road near King's Park. He claimed that time seemed to stand still as a craft that looked like a railway carriage passed about 20 feet over his head. He could clearly see 3 windows, and the craft was filled with some sort of yellow smoke. After it passed over him, everything around him went back to normal. The article goes on to say that 2 incidents took place in the exact same spot in the west end of Glasgow, 21 years apart. The first took place in 1955, when a group of children were playing outside Belhaven Terrace. They all witnessed several entities dressed in white robes descending from the sky. In 1976, a man at Westbourne Gardens was looking out his flat's window when he saw a silver disc hovering about 1,000 feet off the ground. Witnesses in 2 other apartment buildings came forward to say that they saw it also. But the 1990s saw the most UFO encounters. Several of them were as terrifying as Bob Taylor's encounter. According to the Mirror and the Scotland Herald, on August 7, 1992, friends Jerry Wood and Colin Wright were driving down A70 on their way to deliver a satellite TV system to a friend of theirs. As they neared the Harper Egg Reservoir around 10 p.m., they noticed a black object in the sky above them. It had no lights, was round at the bottom, had 3 parts, and was 30 feet wide. Wood stepped on the gas to try and pass underneath it as quickly as possible, but as he did, the craft emitted a piercing curtain of white light, which turned into sort of a black void that they estimated lasts for about 15 seconds. The car shuddered the entire time. When the void lifted, they found themselves driving on the wrong side of the road. They did end up making it to their friend's house in Tarbrax, but their friend was rather put off that they were several hours late.
They said that they thought it only lasted about 15 seconds?
Right.
And the friend said they were hours late.
Well, we know this happens sometimes. There are time slips.
I know, I hate that.
Lost time.
I hate that. That's what creeps me out about UFO encounter stories the most, I think, is the what did you call it? Not time slips.
The lapse in time?
Yeah, like the lost time.
Right.
That's what creeps me out the most.
It's certainly strange. This case was actually reported to the Ministry of Defense, but not until 4 years later in 1996. At that time, both Wood and Wright agreed to go under hypnosis. Now, skeptics, of course, point out that doing both of those things 4 years after the encounter kind of calls into question their credibility, and hypnosis is often discredited due to the possibility of false memories. But I'm going to tell you what the sessions revealed anyway. According to the Mirror, Wood apparently said during hypnosis that he saw 3 creatures coming towards the car. He felt intense pain, like some sort of electric shock, and found himself in some sort of room surrounded by, quote, "we men." Then, a 6-foot gray entered the room. It looked like a classic gray, other than its height, and the fact that it only had 4 very long fingers on each hand. But the sightings didn't end in the 1990s. They are actually continuing to this day. Right now, if you were to jump onto your computer and you Googled Scotland UFO sightings and searched the videos, there are at least a dozen recent videos posted by people asking, "Does anyone know what this is?" Each one shows a completely different type of light anomaly in the sky, from giant V's made up of separate distinct lights to one that looks like a mini spiral galaxy just floating around. Many of them have comments from fellow Scots trying to rationalize or explain the lights, offering up suggestions like Starlink or searchlights. But a handful of them are so strange that it's pretty hard to come up with any explanation at all.
And it's interesting because the videos coming out of Falkirk, at least the ones up on YouTube and stuff, are some of the most compelling what the heck is this lights in the sky videos that I've seen in a very long time.
Right. It sounds like there's definitely some people that have been abducted. And that would account for the lost time.
I know. Now you're going to give me bad dreams. That creeps me out. I'm all for seeing a UFO, but I don't want to have any lost time. Thank you very much.
Well, here's the thing. What if you didn't know the time it was anyway? So if you didn't know the time that it happened, how would you know you had any lost time?
That's great, honey. Thanks.
Really, I mean, unless you look down at your watch and go, well, I'm seeing a UFO right now, how are you going to really know?
Well, if you're taking pictures of it, everybody's got a clock on their phone, so you're going to see what time it is.
Or, I guess, if you were looking at it around 9 p.m. and, you had to be up in the morning, and next thing you know, it's like 5 a.m. in the morning, yeah, I guess that would account for it. But I'm wondering, for some people, how do they know that they've had any lost time?
They wouldn't, I guess. Maybe it happens more than we think.
It could be. It could be that some of us have been abducted and don't even know it.
You're such a jerk.
I'm just saying.
Well, we don't have to worry about it because we don't have any tickets to Falkirk, the Falkirk Triangle, for any time soon.
What is it about all these triangles? They're always mysterious.
And it's always triangles, right? It's never circles like the UFO's circle of Des Moines or whatever. It's always triangles.
Or an oblong or something. It's always a triangle.
Trapezoid. I don't know. That'd be something worth looking into. Why is it always triangles? I'm sure there's a reason.
Yeah. Well, there you have it. The Sweetwater Mansion and the Falkirk Triangle. And I highly suggest you go check out the images online.
Yes, those videos are very cool that you showed me.
They really are. Mm-hmm. You really have to see them for yourself. Well, with that said, join us again next week for an all-new episode of Where Minds Wander.
See you soon. Thank you for joining us. We look forward to traveling with you again to the places where our minds wander.
If you like what you heard, please take a moment and provide us with a 5-star rating and a comment on your favorite listening platform. It really helps us move up the list and become more visible on the podcast charts so new people can find us.
And thank you all for your continued support.
See you next week for an all-new episode.